So I just thought I'd put everything on this slide that is relevant, but it's a little bit too much information, I think. But basically, there's these two frogs, and that are now in the park. The first one, the stuttering frog, put that in the presentation card, but it stutters. These ones hoot, these ones stutter. So, but these guys were thought to be locally extinct for a very long time, and we've just put them back in the park. And the Helioporus giant burrowing frog have been here. They're endangered, but they're still here, which is amazing because they've gone extinct in other areas. So, and there's a lot of reasons why different frogs start to disappear. I put some of them up there, like there are impacts to habitat, like over in the water catchment, there are some impacts over there to some of their stream habitat. Disease is a really big one. Post 1985, chytrid fungus has affected frogs, and it's spread by common frogs. So some frogs are really, their skin gets really damaged by the fungus and they can die. And then fire can also impact their habitat, which is sort of, it's pretty obvious, like frogs breathe through their skin and they need water, and when there's a fire, there's not much food, and it's just bad generally for frogs. But different frogs respond to fire differently. So the burrowing frogs might go under the ground and then it's not a really hot fire. They might be all right. And in fact, some people have found that they might benefit from cooler fires in some areas. But anyway, there are threats, and if you get all of them at once, you can imagine there's populations go extinct. So I really love frogs. I want to work on them regardless, but they are actually, like, we want to do things that are useful and not go and catch them and touch them and do things unless it's actually going to be useful for them. So we really want to work out where the historic sites for these endangered frogs, whether they're still occupied, because we need to know whether they're going extinct in different areas, whether we can do anything about it. We're also we look for new sites, and that might be just because you can't trust the records, the existing records aren't the whole picture. You might find a really good site and have a look, see if they're there. But also it might be a good site that's in a national park to move frogs to. And then we do things like, this is a picture of small, but it's just like a cotton bud in a tube, and you rub it all over the frog, and then you send it off and they measure how many kidney spores are on the frog. And that can sort of tell us whether frogs are living with chytrid and surviving anyway, or whether they're free of chytrid. And then my whole presentation really is about this genetic sampling, because we're really trying to get genetic samples, particularly of the giant burrowing frog, to work out, to sort of answer a lot of questions about the species, because it's been recently split into two subspecies. And then there's also a lot of issues with species now, even just from the highway, bushfire, lack of connectivity and habitat. But a lot of species are becoming inbred, especially endangered species, and not many left. So you get these sort of genetic bottlenecks. So we really want to learn from genetics, and it only takes a 2 millimeter piece of skin, and from a frog it's like a tiny, tiny bit of skin off maybe the end of one of the back toes, or a tiny bit of skin from between the toes, and it just grows back. So it's pretty low impact on the frog. Yeah, I keep going.
Have a sound bite to this stuttering frog. So,
yeah, I can play it.
I know that maniac or cat frog sort of running.
Oh, yeah. This one's kind of like that. But I'll play one for you. So that's it. So I just thought you might be interested in it, but actually I should probably move through these slides quickly and get to the burrowing frog. But this one is about that big, really big. They eat funnel webs.
Wow. What really is, you mentioned that they can be challenged in water catchment. What would be out there in water catchment?
Oh, there's mining impacts out there.
Oh, yeah.
So that Bixby Australis, it's called, it's in it's in the process of being listed, but it's endangered. It used to be Bixby valvis. Because of genetics, it's been split. So it used to have that distribution, and then from 2000 onwards, you're not getting as many records. And then since 2020 or since the bushfires, there's been no records south of Newcastle. And so people are thinking that they've, ignore that red dot there because that's where we released them, but people are thinking that they've gone extinct because there have been a lot of surveys, but you never know. I kind of think there might be somewhere, but certainly huge reduction in numbers, like and there's a lot of ecologists that have their patch, there's the guy that lives down here and the guy that lives here, and they go to all their spots and they're just not finding them year after year after year. So they're definitely declining. And then I'm going to skip over this because it's getting a bit too much detail, but we can look at different populations of genetics and then look at the best population you might want to use to do a breeding program. And so Symbio are doing a breeding program for this species. It's really exciting because they applied for an EP grant and collected adults from this range up here, the mile range, and then there's an arrow. So they've been released at Nowra, north of the Shoalhaven River, up in the hills, like in the rainforest site. And then that was really successful. And then they've been released in the Royal National Park and the Florida Parks. And yeah, this is the Royal National Park site over there, which is Hawley's Creek. And then they've also released a bunch of other creeks in the park. But Hawley is a historical site, like they used to be in there and they weren't there anymore. So that's really exciting. And at the Nowra site, they've been breeding in the wild for several years, and it's very dark, and that's where chytrid fungus affects frogs most, in the dark, wet environments, and it's cold. And they're surviving really well in breeding, regardless of chytrid. They're covered in chytrid, so they're the ones we put into the Royal, and we really think they're going to persist in the Royal because of this sort of pilot site. So I'm moving on to the giant burrowing frog. So it used to be, it goes all the way down through to Victoria, from about Newcastle down to Victoria, but it was recently split into two species. And okay, so I just wanted to point out some things to look for because I'd really like you to look for them because they're very cryptic and hard to find. And like a day like this is perfect if you want to go out tonight. It would be perfect. They've got a vertical iris. So vertical iris in their eye. The yellow marking. They also have yellow markings on the cloaca. That's how you say it. I haven't even written it. But and they've got spikes on their feet, the males. I have to see that. And so yeah, the sides are spotted, belly is white. Vertical pupil is key. I'm going to quiz you on this later. Yeah. This is an amazing photo by a guy we work with, Alex Pike. He's an underwater photographer as well as a scientist. But these are the tadpoles. They're usually the thing that we find, and they're usually the thing that people send me photos of when they're out bushwalking. It took me years to actually feel confident identifying them. And I'm still sometimes a bit unsure, but you'll see why. But I'm really keen to know if we ever see any big black tadpoles because there's a few other species you could confuse them with. But even if it was wrong, I'd love to hear it if you see any big black tadpoles, because then I can go check them out. So
Tadpole size, big.
yeah, so they're about 7 centimeters long.
Yeah.
But when they come out of an egg, they're only about 2 centimeters long. So at the moment, they're coming out of eggs now because they breed in summer. I think they're breeding tonight. But yeah, so egg, but they're about 3 centimeters when they hatch, but then they get bigger, and they take like 9 months to a year before they even become a frog. But they're in a pool all year. So if you go somewhere and you check again and then you check again and they're not there, maybe it's not a breeding site. You're probably going to see them at some point if they live there and breed there. So in saying that, they're down in the Curramoors area, swamps, and I've checked their creeks so many times and there's no tadpoles in it. And I walked down the track recently and found like 12 adult frogs all out in breed. I don't know where they're breeding down there, but sometimes they choose one pool in the whole creek. And maybe I just didn't check very hard in the goggles. So yeah, they're very plump, like they're not slender. They're like really beautifully, like they look wide across abdomen and deep, snout broadly rounded. So the oral disc is the mouth. You can see how it like faces down. That's really sort of key identifying feature. The eye is really beautiful, like it's grey, it's got little silver gold flecks. And cut it out, but basically that's called the spherical, and it's kind of on that bottom quadrant of the body. But you can see that if you saw them and scoop them up in a little glass container, because that's what I'd encourage you to do instead of touching them. You just look at them in the container, and that's like to the left, like towards the snout, so from the midline up. And then, yeah, it's below the midline of the body. So when you start adding these things together and the vent tube comes down straight out of the fin, there's all these different little features. If you want to, you can actually get a book. If you get your ID handbook, there's a book by Mary Emphasis. But it's just like a little handbook that tells you all the information on this. But it's actually really easy to identify tadpoles if you just scoop them up in a jar and just basically go through all the identification. Yep.
Have you done surveys of the snakes in the Royal National Park? Have they for enough period to maintain tadpoles in there, but not the same?
Yes.
They are.
But they're very hard to get into. I had looked in the swamp. They love the swamp. They live in there. Like Southwest creek, and then there's like swamp, and then there's a big creek, and then swamp, and then more creek, and there's tadpoles in some of those pools between the swamps. Yeah. Yeah. Crystal pool, yeah, and upstream. Yeah. Well, I haven't actually got any samples from there yet, but Alex found some tadpoles at Crystal Pool when he was underwater looking at crayfish. So they get washed down. So Crystal Pool is a bit big for where they breed, but it was right after a big flood and the tadpoles get washed down. I found some at Carrang, the next one. Yeah. I found them like right before the waterfall that goes off the edge of the ocean, which is not where they breed. They would have been breeding up in the swamp and they probably got washed down. But they're in the water for a year. Sometimes they don't hold on properly and there's a flood or that cover. But
What is all this weight? I think it's like the ball, but
so that. Keep them out.
That's in the backyard.
I don't see it. I go back.
This is on a different screen.
Oh, don't worry. I can just keep going.
I can go to the. Yeah. You should go back.
Back that way.
No, you want to go this way.
Yeah.
Right, not there.
Councillor.
I'm not sure.
That's all right.
Hang on.
Let's just, I'll stop talking.
Yeah.
So Collins Creek is for the other two funnel eating frog. They're the extinguished child southern frog. They like rainforest. Whereas the burrowing frog, they're up high near the swamps where they can burrow in the sand. And they would never be down in the rainforest. They're two very different. And it's interesting if you start studying all the frogs, there's ones at the top and the ones that's slightly overlap, and then there's others that like the Blue Mountains tree frog and trofar are like all through the middle of the creek. And then, but they're not usually just right down in the rainforest, although they can be. And the mixed use Australia actually eat those, which they actually eat other frogs. Yeah, I was just showing the previous slides. Oh, thank you. That's a metamorph, but so it's about to come out, and I just thought it was really cool. I'm just showing more photos, so if you saw any, you might know. So they're very dark. They have a little bit of a blue belly, but then the other ones over there, you can see they're not perfectly black. They're like water brown. So you can see that spherical is in the middle. It should be over there. So you can start to, and the mouth should be at the bottom. So if you're being really careful, you can probably tell it's not. It's like
Zoom, everybody on Zoom, have you got the presentation back? Good.
No, it's the breathing.
Yeah.
The spherical they use by a lot of things. Rocks when they're rearranging the Hollywood invertebrates as well. And some species trap air, go to the top, trap air, sits around the spherical and they breathe through that.
yeah, you put them out. Yeah. So that's the burrower. And I think the mouth is the most characteristic, but they also kind of have like an eyebrow. Yeah. So this is the range of the burrowers, and northern subspecies is here and royal, and then southern subspecies is down to Victoria, and you can see they overlap because that's what people call the contact zone between the two. And the reason there's two subspecies and not two species is because someone found a hybrid, which is really frustrating, but very interesting. And they found the hybrid at Gerringong Falls, the top of the waterfall at Burrowing National Park. And so, yeah, but they actually look pretty different as you get further south. And there's other differences in genetics as you get further south, but there's a very distinct difference here enough to split the species into two if there wasn't a hybrid. Because of the hybrid, they have to be subspecies. If we don't find any more hybrids over and over, they'll probably just be split into two species. I've been looking for one, but I can't find one.
What's the visual difference between those?
I'll show you.
Thank you.
I'll show you. I'll show you some photos in a sec. So I thought I'd just focus on the royal. This is the records in the royal. And this is why in the royal I've been doing work in the water catchment and made it increased in here. Everyone to volunteer to come out. 40 miles in there. And then Holsworthy, I'm trying to get Newton to go in there. I think I'll have to be escorted and army and stuff. But I've got a lot of, where is the thing? I've got a lot of records from there, already out of bounds a little bit. But I don't have any from here in Heathcote National Park, and there are records in there. So I did look along the pipeline trail, and I've looked a little bit, but I just don't really have time to look everywhere. I'd love it if any of you are bushwalking to help me if you see anything. So these ones are very close to the road. I don't know if you know that one, but that's hand roll. So there's some little creeks in there, and they like the first pool on the top of the creek. So you're walking down a gully, and there's nothing, and then eventually it starts forming into pools, and they'll be in front of the pool. Usually, once they wash down. And then this one's over towards Warren, it's the pipeline trail one. That creek on the pipeline trail is great habitat. I feel like I haven't checked it enough.
What's that?
No,
Sorry.
Savage over there.
I did have a question though, that it's about Warrenora, which creeks you went into there.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Warren,
Right, you get on with the,
Yeah, with the out.
with coal mines.
there.
Yeah.
There's Honeysuckle Creek and Bee Creek, and they're in every creek.
They're not the undermined ones, though, those ones.
Some of them will be.
Real, as in certainly, or as in,
Yes, I think some of them, and over here, this is already undermined.
if you go in there
It's going there.
Yeah.
and you can find any.
Did you get in?
No, I couldn't find any in that area. I have a permission to go in the Ordinary Wales for this research project. So I'm trying to. There's a population in here that really, there's a lot of tadpoles in every creek, and it's kind of like the Royal, whereas other areas there's not that many, so they're hard to find. So I've got about 100 samples from here, from different creeks. Well, maybe not 100, only like 80. No, but there's a PhD student at Wollongong who is keen to have a look at some of the genetics. So we really want to know why they're so strong in here and over here. Is it the salt, like helping with citrus? Is it the protection from fire? I mean, oil has been burned so many times, but still, it'd be like there's patches that don't get burned, and then it's so strong here. And we sort of want to know why the case study, because we are studying them all the way to Victoria, and we're trying to get a biogeographical idea of like their genetics, species range wide. We really want to know why they love it in the Royal. It's so strong here. Other species in the Royal have died out, like Victoria Little John Eye, which is a coexisting species that's over here. There's the tree frog, it's called the peace frog, and they breed in the exact same pools and they live in the exact same swamps, but there's none in Royal, and they're gone. So I'm really sure they're gone. But they're over here. So there's the dam, there's good size, but so the PhD students will look at this population and these ones and look at how injured they are. Like, I'm not a geneticist, but they can look at a lot of things called genetic structuring and different like bottlenecks they've encountered in the past from this genetics now. I don't really understand it all, but like that would probably come out in scientific papers in the near future with that student for her thesis. We've learned more about the frog in the part then. But yeah, so interestingly, there are some records in Holsworthy, and I think there's been apologists in there that have found it. There's probably heaps in there, and it looks like good habitat, but I'm not that worried about them in Holsworthy because, I mean, even though there's things that go on in there. So there's also that one that I really want to know more about this area, and it's just west of Engadine. There's all these little gullies. This one, there's one there, there's one this here, and a lot of them are unnamed, but there's a record there. But I'd be really keen to know more about, Heathcote. So this is my quiz for you. Just to test if you'll know what it is if you see one. So what do you think this one is? Burrowing, yeah. What is it? The eye?
Oh, it's little yellow dots around its cloac.
Oh, yeah. I would also say the iris, and then you can see he's got the spikes. Okay. What about that one? There they are.
So why are they important? Why is it important to know where they are and how many there are? What do they do for the ecosystem? What is their role?
I won't be ask you that, but I like you might.
They have roles.
Some things have obvious roles, but
I'll give you an example that's not this frog, just to give you a perspective. The Burrowing frog used to occupy, like the amount of biomass of Burrowing frogs in the environment in Australia used to be equal to that of wombats up there. They're tiny, but like there were so many of them. I don't know if that's just includes tadpoles, but probably does. Anyway, frogs are a biomass in the environment, and we do consider that when we release them, like the ones we release into the royal, the big ones that eat funnelworms. They used to be in the royal, and we think that it's things like hatred and fire that have reduced their numbers and not really natural. They are natural causes, but it's like we don't think it would be detrimental to the ecosystem to put them back in. And that is a consideration because they used to be in the royal, whereas we probably would have put something back in the royal that wasn't really ever here. But people might in the future because it's so protected in the coast. But usually you wouldn't do that. There are places that's been done, like in fenced enclosures, like in New Zealand and in some areas of Australia. But so I found that one recently in the world. I think it was pretty nice. It was a female.
And the burrow's obvious.
What about that one?
The other one. That's not very That's not the very one. It's not the goal. So
this one is a pole bomb, but it looks like the iris is vertical, which is confusing. That's definitely a pole bomb.
With the what?
Pole bomb.
I'd be able to say that. Hold on.
Polygon or polygon.
I think it just shows you that, like, because I've got it wrong. I've got it wrong. But there's something about knowing them too, where you're like, no, it's one. But it's that one is a bubble bomb. But maybe when I first started, I'd probably look twice at it and be like, oh, is it one? But it's sort of sometimes they're quite yellow. This one, I wasn't sure. I mean, it looks like a burrowing frog, but the iris actually looked horizontal. And I had to catch it, and I try not to actually catch them all the time unless you have to take a sample. It didn't have much yellow, and it didn't have, it doesn't have the spikes, but we thought it probably was a burrowing frog.
He's cranky with you.
Yeah, they pop up when you rub them with the. What do you think of that one?
The burrowing frogs, it's regular dogs or not?
Yeah, well, this one was taken down in Victoria, so it's southern one. So it looks a bit different, it's still got the vertical iris, and yeah, so that one, yeah, it's the southern subspecies. Again, it looks like a vertical iris, but it's not, it's just round and it's hollowable.
So what's the difference between a toad and a frog?
A toad,
Yeah, isn't there like Barnaby Joyce looking ugly?
It's longer than that, because now,
well, I'll just start it, so, do you recognise tadpole?
The big tadpole.
So that's a burrowing frog tadpole. What do you think of that one?
Also big tadpole.
That's a pole bomb. I know it's a bad photo, but these are the photos people send.
Yeah.
And so I can't identify a photo like that, but I'd probably go and look in the bush if you sent me a photo like that. But it sort of doesn't really looks a bit slender. But I'd still be excited if you sent me a photo like that. That would be a great photo to send me. It's just like a little plastic container. And a side photo would also be great. A side photo? No. You can see the grey eye, and it's quite wide, and that's the burrowing frog tadpole. That's it. Yeah.
Do you have any photos of the clusters of eggs?
No, I've never seen any. I've been trying really hard. I went out days in a row in the rain the other day, desperate to find them, and found newly hatched tadpoles with no eggs and no adults. It was like perfect, have like perfect conditions like this and warm and no wind, and they bred just before the rain instead of just after. Most of the time you look just after the rain, but yeah.
Do you know whether the eggs are in clusters?
Yeah, they're in a foamy cluster.
Do they hang around reeds or anything like that?
Yeah, so if we're out looking on the creek, they might be, there's a great photo of one by a guy called Max Plant who's been studying the Victorian frogs, the same one, but in Victoria. And they were underneath a little sort of overhang on the edge of a creek, or like how there's almost like an undercut where the roots are hanging over it, or like a little sandstone sort of up overhanging thing. And then they were just in there. But I've heard they can lay eggs in the middle of vegetation like Garnia or Flamandra that's in the water, and they'll lay eggs in the middle of it as the water's flying over the eggs. Eventually they go into the creek, but they don't lay eggs outside of the water. Like they're going to lay them right on the edge or like somewhere in the water, because they have to be in the water.
what are the main predators?
Foxes in the world. I guess birds and maybe predatory birds at night. I mean, they sit out on the fire trail. If you walk around at night tonight, I guarantee you see them. Sort of, yeah. 90%. They sit really high, and you have a head toward. You can see them from about 100 meters away. With big eyes, and they're that big. And then, as you go up to them, they lay down really like flat, and they have like they run height. They close their eyes. So I mean, I don't really know. I know that we considered for the mix being released, we considered the fact that Royal was protected really well from Brendan explained the fox baiting program they've got here, and it is protected pretty well from fire, and foxes are if you release an endangered frog into an area and the foxes just come and eat them all, it's not a very effective approach. So I'm wondering if like the fox baiting is really helping these species, but they are in pretty dense environments like the swamps. So I feel like they're very safe in there, but maybe not as safe in there on the fire trails. They sit just along the fire trail and they spread out every about 25 minutes to find another one down the Paramours and the Walmara, like Mount Bass. If tonight any of those fire trails you see them probably.
Not focused.
Yeah, and so the hard thing is they are endangered and there's not that many, even though they love the world. There's heaps in the world, but some nights, like it is now, and I've gone out looking for them and found none, and I'm really sad because it seems like a perfect night, and it's like, where are they? And like, there's a lot we don't know. But we also think they do travel pretty far because on the Wallamara track, they're breeding down in the creek to the south, and it's a pretty long way from the track. And when it's not breeding season and it's raining, they come out and forage along that track, and there's so many of them, and they have to go down to that creek to breed. It's really a summer to breed. So they're travelling pretty far, and they're quite cool. They don't hop that much; they just walk around. But yeah, so they move pretty far is what we think, like for a large frog that's like a ground, not a tree frog. So we're just wondering with the genetics as well, whether they're like mixing across the Warranora, Heathcote, Royal area. I'd love to see the genetics say that they actually mix across that triangle, but we don't really know, and I have no records from Heathcote, or no samples from Heathcote. So that was my main thing, that I would really love some help looking for them in Heathcote if anyone was keen. And most of the time it's more effective to go out in the day and look for tadpoles, looking for adults who lose a lot of sleep and you don't find them very often. Yeah. I think that's
And where do they burrow? How obviously?
well, I don't really know. I haven't actually found that many in my whole life. I've probably found maybe like 40 or 50 adults ever. And they're always just sitting out foraging for insects. I've only seen one come out of the sand, and it was just wet sand. But I've also seen them just appear. I'm like, where did it come from? Like, it's light, and we're waiting for the dark.
They're more very far.
I think they sit under leaf litter as well. They're not like burrowing all the way down every night and coming all the way back up. They just sit under leaf litter in the forest. Because we find them just walking around the forest. And so I think they probably sit in the leaf litter with their eyes just out. And then in the dark, they're just coming up and start foraging. Maybe during wetter periods, and they go under the sand, maybe in dry periods.
Right.
I don't really know. But it's amazing if you can't see any, and as soon as it gets dark, it'll just start coming out. It's quite cool. And not many of them are covered in sand. So it's like maybe they just hang out of the bush. Yeah.
No, we're out of time.
Oh, it was really important.
But yeah, if you can email me, there's my email.
We'll put that up on our
Yeah.
newsletter and on the website.
That would be great.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Consider becoming a volunteer yourself to help keep this iconic gem for future generations.